My name is Aisha Rahman. I am 27 years old. I was born in a small town, the only daughter of my parents. My childhood was not filled with luxury, but it was full of love. My father worked long hours at an office, while my mother stayed at home, raising me with patience and warmth. I was a quiet child, always watching the world around me. I never dreamed of riches or fame. All I ever wanted was a simple life. Peace, a small home, and someone who would love me deeply. That dream felt complete when I married Armin. He was not the wealthiest man, but he was kind and soft-spoken. His smile carried a warmth that could melt away my worries. When we married, I believed that I had found the man who would protect my heart for the rest of my life. We built our little home together. It was not grand, but it was filled with laughter, small joys, and promises whispered late at night. I would often sit on the balcony, watching the sunset, while he sipped tea beside me. Those moments were my definition of happiness. But happiness, I later realized, can be fragile. And sometimes life brings storms we never expect. The storm in my life came in the form of a woman, the woman who became my neighbor. In the first few years of my marriage, life was beautifully simple. I would wake early, prepare breakfast, and wait for Armin to join me at the table. He would smile, kiss my forehead, and leave for work. In the evenings we would cook together, share stories, and sometimes take long walks through the neighborhood. I loved the way he looked at me when I laughed, as if I was the only person in the world. I felt safe, treasured, and loved. We didn't have much money, but we had each other, and that was enough for me. I believed our love was unshakable. I believed nothing could break the bond we shared. But love, I was soon to learn, is not always broken from the outside. It often cracks from the inside, silently, without warning. It was a bright morning when a moving truck stopped in front of the house next door. From my balcony, I watched as boxes were unloaded and a young woman stepped out. Her name was Nadia. She was beautiful. Far more beautiful than I ever considered myself to be. Her skin glowed, her hair always perfectly styled, and she carried herself with a confidence I lacked. From the moment I saw her, I felt something unsettling in my chest, though I could not explain why. When she introduced herself, she smiled warmly, her eyes shining with charm. "Hello, I'm Nadia. I just moved here. I hope we'll be good neighbors." I smiled back politely. "Of course. Welcome." At first I thought little of it. She was friendly, often visiting with small gifts or chatting with me on the balcony. But soon I noticed something I could not ignore. Her eyes lingered too long on Armin. She laughed a little louder when he was around. She asked questions about him that felt too personal. And Armin? He smiled back at her in ways he no longer smiled at me. At first it was harmless, or at least it seemed so. Nadia would come over, pretending she needed help with something. Her Wi-Fi not working, a light bulb that needed fixing, or a heavy box she couldn't carry. And every time, Armin would rush to help her. I would watch from the kitchen window as they laughed together. Her hand lightly brushing his arm as though it was an accident. My stomach would tighten, but I said nothing. I told myself, she's just a neighbor. Don't be paranoid. But the small interactions grew. Armin began to mention her in conversations. Nadia said there's a new restaurant nearby. Nadia recommended this book. Nadia told me about this movie. Her name slipped into our lives like a shadow, growing darker each day. It started with little things, so little that anyone else might have ignored them. But when you are a wife, you notice. Armin had always been attentive to me. He would notice if I was quiet, if I was tired, or if I needed comfort. But slowly, his attention drifted. One evening, as I set the dinner table, I noticed him staring at his phone, smiling. "What's making you smile?" I asked softly. He quickly put the phone down. "Oh, nothing. Just a message from a colleague." But something in his tone was different. It wasn't guilt exactly, but it wasn't honesty either. That night, when he fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling, my heart heavy. A thought kept whispering in my head. Was it Nadia? The next day, as if fate wanted to punish me, I caught them laughing together outside. Nadia's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, and he didn't move away. When he came in, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You two seem to talk a lot." He frowned. "She's just a neighbor, Aisha. Don't overthink." His words were calm, but his eyes avoided mine. That was when the first crack appeared in my heart. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, like a candle burning out little by little. Armin no longer asked me about my day. He spent more time outside, always with excuses. Extra work, meeting a friend, or helping Nadia with something. Our dinners grew quieter. He stopped looking at me the way he once did. When I laughed, his smile was absent. When I cried, his arms no longer reached for me. One night, I confronted him gently. "Armin, are you happy with me?" He looked surprised. "Why would you even ask that?" "Because you don't look at me anymore. You look away." He sighed and held my hand, but it felt empty. "You're imagining things," he said. But I wasn't imagining. I could feel it, the distance growing between us, and Nadia standing in that distance, taking the space that used to belong to me. The hardest part of betrayal is not the act itself, but the silence that surrounds it. I found myself sitting alone more often, staring at the empty chair across the table. Sometimes I cooked his favorite meals, only for him to return late, saying he had already eaten. I cried in the shower, where he couldn't hear me. I wrote in my diary, words soaked in tears. I prayed, begging God to return my husband's heart to me. But nothing changed. One afternoon, I saw them together in Nadia's garden. She was showing him flowers, laughing softly, while his eyes lingered on her face in a way that used to belong to me. I turned away quickly, but the image burned into my heart. That night, I cried until my pillow was wet, asking myself over and over, what did I do wrong? Was I not enough? It happened on an afternoon I will never forget. I was watering the small plants on my balcony when Nadia appeared on hers. She leaned over the railing, her eyes finding mine. There was no friendliness in her smile that day, only a boldness that made my stomach twist. "Aisha," she called softly. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, but I nodded. Minutes later, she was standing in my living room, her perfume filling the air. She looked flawless as always, her hair neatly curled, her lips painted in a deep shade of red. She sat down comfortably, as if the house belonged to her, and looked straight into my eyes. "I think you already know," she began, her voice calm, almost cruel in its confidence. "Know what?" I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled. "That I love Armin." The word struck me like a blade. My chest tightened, my hands grew cold. I stared at her, unable to breathe for a moment. "What did you say?" "I said I love him," she repeated, leaning back as though she were proud of it. "And don't act surprised, Aisha. You must have seen it. The way he looks at me, the way he comes whenever I call. He feels something too, I can see it in his eyes." Tears stung my vision, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. "You're wrong," I whispered. "He's my husband." Nadia tilted her head and laughed lightly. "Yes, he's your husband now. But hearts don't belong to paper or promises. They belong where they want to. And his heart, it's drifting, Aisha. You can feel it, can't you?" Her words cut deeper than knives because they were the truth I had been too afraid to admit. I wanted to scream, to push her out of my house, but my voice betrayed me. I just sat there, frozen, my tears finally falling silently down my cheeks. Before leaving, she placed her hand on mine, almost mockingly. "You're a good woman, Aisha. But sometimes being good isn't enough." And then she walked out, leaving me shattered, my world crashing into pieces around me. That night, I didn't confront Armin. Couldn't. Because deep down I already knew she was right. I was losing him, piece by piece, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. After Nadia's confession, my world was no longer the same. The walls of my home, once filled with warmth, now felt cold and empty. Every corner whispered doubts. Every silence screamed betrayal. Armin seemed even further away from me. He no longer looked into my eyes when we spoke. He no longer laughed at my small jokes. He no longer asked if I had eaten, if I had slept, if I was okay. Instead, he spent more and more time outside, claiming work, errands, or sudden meetings. But I knew exactly where he was. One evening, I gathered the courage to ask, "Armin, do you love me?" I asked softly as we sat at the dinner table. He froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, his eyes tired, almost guilty. "Why would you ask me that?" "Because you don't feel like mine anymore," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You're here, but your heart isn't." He put the spoon down, sighing heavily. "Aisha, please. Don't make this harder. I don't want to hurt you." The words tore me apart. Don't want to hurt you. But he already was. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Then why, Armin? Why her?" He didn't answer. He didn't deny it either. He just lowered his gaze. His silence louder than any confession. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing. The man I had loved, trusted, and prayed for was slipping through my fingers. And I couldn't hold him anymore. I wanted to scream, to fight, to beg him to stay. But a strange stillness had settled in my heart. Sometimes silence is more painful than words. Day by day, our marriage shattered. We still lived in the same house, ate at the same table, and shared the same bed. But we were no longer husband and wife. We were strangers bound by a piece of paper. And outside, just next door, Nadia waited for the day when the last piece of him would break away from me and belong entirely to her. Time does not heal all wounds. Sometimes it only deepens them. Weeks passed, but nothing changed except me. I grew quieter, weaker, more fragile with each passing day. The laughter that once lived in my home was gone. Even my reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Eyes swollen from sleepless nights, a smile that no longer existed. Armin still lived with me, but his heart was elsewhere. Every time his phone buzzed, I felt the sting in my chest. Every time he said he was going out, I already knew whose presence he was seeking. One night, I sat alone on the balcony, staring at the stars. The air was cool, but my heart was burning. I whispered to myself, when did love turn into loneliness? When did marriage turn into prison? Armin came home late that night. I waited for him, not to fight, not to beg, but to speak the words I had kept locked inside. When he entered, I stood in front of him, my hands trembling. "Armin," I said softly, "I won't stop you anymore." He looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" Tears filled my eyes, but I forced a smile. "You love her. Can see it. I've seen it for a long time. And I've been holding on to you like sand in my hands. But the harder I try, the faster you slip away." "Aisha." His voice cracked, but he didn't deny it. "I'll always love you," I whispered. "But I can't fight a war I've already lost." "She makes you happy, then go." "I will let you go." For a long moment, silence filled the room. His eyes were heavy with guilt, but guilt was not love. I knew that now. That night, I cried silently until dawn. And by morning, the man who once promised to hold me forever was gone. I still live in the same house, but it feels like a graveyard of memories. The walls carry the echoes of our laughter, our promises, our love. But they also carry the silence of our end. Sometimes I see them together, Armin and Nadia. They smile, they walk side by side, and I turn away before my tears fall. I am broken, yes, but I am still alive. And maybe one day, when the pain finally fades, I will learn to love myself again. Because the cruelest truth I have learned is this. Sometimes the person you love most becomes the reason you break. And sometimes letting go is the only way to survive. The first morning without Armin was the hardest. I woke up to silence. The bed beside me was cold, the pillow untouched. For years, I had grown used to the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his body near mine. But now there was only emptiness. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door. He had taken his clothes, his shoes, his books, but the memories, the promises, the love we once shared, those still haunted every corner of the house. I went to the kitchen and poured tea into 2 cups out of habit. Only when I placed 1 cup in front of his empty chair did I realize how deeply his absence had rooted itself in me. I broke down then, clutching the cup, my tears falling into the tea. The neighbors whispered. I could feel their eyes on me when I stepped outside. They must have noticed Armin leaving, noticed how Nadia had replaced me. But no one asked. No one wanted to touch the wound that was still bleeding. Nights were the worst. I would sit by the window, staring at Nadia's house. Sometimes I saw them together, Armin's laughter drifting into the quiet night, his smile shining in the light of her balcony. A smile that once belonged only to me. And I would press my hand against the glass, whispering, "Why wasn't I enough?" I tried to keep myself busy, cleaning, cooking, reading, but everything reminded me of him. The way he used to tease me while I chopped vegetables, the way he used to leave his books scattered around the living room, the way his cologne lingered on his clothes. It was as though the house itself had become a prison of memories, holding me captive to a love that no longer existed. Some nights, I prayed harder than ever before. Not for him to return, because I knew he wouldn't, but for the strength to live without him. But strength did not come easily. Only loneliness did. The days blurred into weeks, and the weeks into months. Life outside my window went on as if nothing had changed. Children still laughed in the streets, neighbors still exchanged greetings, and the world still spun, indifferent to my broken heart. But inside me time had stopped. I would see Armin sometimes, walking beside Nadia. His hand, the same hand that once held mine so tightly, now rested easily in hers. His smile, the smile that once gave me comfort, now belonged to her. At first I couldn't look. I would close the curtains, hide inside my room, and cry until I had no strength left. But with time I learned to watch silently, my heart aching but my tears refusing to fall. Perhaps I had cried them all away. The world had moved on without me. Armin had moved on. Nadia had moved on. Everyone around me was living, loving, and laughing. I was stuck. I tried to return to my old hobbies. I picked up my sketchbook, but every line I drew turned into his face. I tried reading, but every story reminded me of ours. I tried cooking, but every recipe was one he loved. Even the simplest things betrayed me. The scent of rain reminded me of our walks. The sound of music reminded me of our late-night talks. The sight of couples holding hands reminded me of everything I had lost. One afternoon I overheard 2 women talking outside. "They look perfect together, don't they?" one said, clearly referring to Armin and Nadia. "Yes," the other replied. "It's like they were meant for each other." Their words pierced me, but I stayed silent. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had never been the one meant for him. I returned inside and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at me was pale, thin, and lifeless. Her eyes no longer carried light, they carried sorrow. She was not the Aisha who once dreamed of love, who once believed marriage meant forever. She was a shadow of who she used to be. And for the first time I wondered if I would ever find myself again, or if the world would simply keep moving, leaving me behind in my grief. I used to believe that love was eternal, that once 2 hearts became one, nothing could separate them. But life has taught me a crueler truth. Love is fragile, and sometimes, no matter how deeply you give yourself, it will not be enough. The day I truly accepted this came quietly. I was walking home from the market when I saw them, Armin and Nadia, coming out of a shop together. She held his arm, laughing, while he carried the bags with ease. Their faces glowed with happiness, as if they had the whole world in their hands. For a moment I froze, my heart pounding painfully. My first instinct was to look away, to escape, to hide. But something inside me whispered no. Face it. So I stood there watching them. And for the first time I didn't cry. There were no tears left in me. Only silence. They passed by without noticing me, their laughter fading into the distance. And I realized at that moment that I no longer existed in Armin's world. I was just a chapter he had closed, a memory he had chosen to forget. That night, I sat in my empty home and whispered to myself, "It's over, Aisha. It's truly over." And strangely, those words did not break me. They freed me. Yes, my heart was shattered. Yes, I was alone. But I was still alive. And as much as it hurt, I knew I could not spend the rest of my life mourning someone who had already left me behind. So I began writing in my diary. Not about him, not about Nadia, not about the pain. I began writing about me. About the woman I had lost somewhere in the shadows of marriage. About the dreams I once had before love consumed me. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. And though the scars of betrayal would remain, I promised myself one thing. I would never again let someone else's love decide my worth. For I have learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes love does not last forever. But survival does.